Imagine this. You have camped out overnight in a London park. You have queued for hours in a summer heatwave, bleary-eyed and hopeful, all for the small chance of a same-day ticket to the most famous tennis tournament on earth. Finally, you shuffle forward to the counter to collect your pass, and the person handing it to you, smiling, wishing you a wonderful day, is not a steward or a volunteer. It is the future Queen of England. That is exactly what happened at Wimbledon this week, and it has utterly charmed the nation. The Princess of Wales, Catherine, did something no senior royal has really done before. Instead of sweeping in through the private entrance to take her grand seat in the royal box, she went to the ordinary people, joined the famous queue, stepped behind the ticket desk, and handed out tickets herself. A princess working the counter, and people cannot stop talking about it. So pour yourself something warm, settle in and stay with me, because today we are going to unpack this lovely, unexpected moment properly. What she actually did, and why it broke with royal habit. The rich and rather wonderful history of the royals at Wimbledon, and the traditions that sit behind that famous royal box. And then, gently, the bigger question it raises. When a future queen steps out from behind the velvet rope to serve tickets like a volunteer, is that a beautiful modernization of the monarchy, or does it quietly spend a little of the magic that makes royalty special? As ever, there is more than one way to see it. Here is what I promise you. I'm going to walk you through the delightful detail of the day, explain the centuries of tradition it gently overturned, and give you both honest ways of reading it, so you can decide for yourself. Stay with me, because a small moment at a ticket desk turns out to tell a surprisingly big story about what the modern monarchy is becoming. This is Richard Valentin. I'm Richard. Let's get into it. Now, this is a warm and happy story, and I intend for us to enjoy it. It comes, of course, against the backdrop of Catherine's return to public life after her illness, and I will touch on that only with care, and only using what she herself has shared. But the heart of today is not her health. It is a genuinely charming public moment, and the fascinating traditions it brushed up against. And where a young child or two appears at the edges of the story, they will stay right there at the edges, mentioned only in passing. As always, I will mark the ground. What she did is confirmed and on the record. The history is a matter of record too. And the reflection at the end is partly my own reading. Let's start with what actually happened, because the details are what make it so delightful. On Thursday, the 2nd of July, the 4th day of this year's championships, the Princess of Wales made her first Wimbledon appearance of 2026. Now, she is no stranger to the tournament. Catherine is a genuine lifelong tennis fan, and she has been a familiar face there for years. But this appearance was different from the very first moment, and not just because of her outfit, a striking sapphire-blue suit by the designer Gabriela Hearst, worn with a simple white tee, perfectly judged for a day when London was baking in its third heatwave of the summer. What made it different was where she went, and what she did. Rather than heading straight for the grandeur of Centre Court, Catherine made her first stop at the one place royals almost never go: the queue. For those who do not know it, the Wimbledon queue is one of the great institutions of British sport, a legendary line of thousands of fans, many of whom camp out overnight in a nearby park, all hoping to snap up one of the limited same-day tickets. It is hot, it is long, it is a test of patience and dedication. And into that very ordinary, very human scene walked the future Queen of England to say hello. She did not just wave and move on. She waded right in. She chatted with the fans who had waited through the night. She posed for photographs. She laughed and joked with people in the line. And then came the moment that truly stunned everyone. She went behind the ticket desk. Working alongside the honorary stewards, the dedicated volunteers who manage that famous queue every year, Catherine helped take payment and personally handed tickets to the astonished fans who reached the front. Picture it. You have queued since before dawn, and the person passing you your ticket, telling you to have a great time, is the Princess of Wales. One fan summed up the disbelief perfectly, saying they never in their life expected to see a princess holding out a card machine. It is a wonderful image, and it is entirely real. And the reaction in that moment told its own story. As word rippled back through the line that the Princess of Wales was actually there, working the desk, you can imagine the ripple of disbelief and delight. Phones came out. People craned to see. Some simply stood back and took it in, aware they were witnessing something they would never see again. There is a lovely, almost old-fashioned quality to that kind of surprise in our age, when so much is filmed, trailed, and announced in advance. Nobody in that queue had been promised a royal encounter. It arrived unbidden, and it was all the sweeter for it. For a tournament that prides itself on tradition and a certain gentle magic, it was about the most Wimbledon thing imaginable. And the day did not stop at the ticket desk. Having greeted the crowds and done her turn at the counter, Catherine then made her way inside and took her seat courtside to watch the tennis, as any devoted fan would. She watched a ladies' singles match, and she did so seated beside a name every British tennis lover knows, the former Wimbledon champion Andy Murray. So in the space of a single afternoon, she moved from the very bottom of the Wimbledon experience, the overnight queue, right up to the most privileged view in the house, sitting alongside a sporting hero. That whole arc, from the ticket counter to a champion's company in one day, tells you something about how she wanted to experience the tournament this year. Not from a sealed-off box, but across the full sweep of it, the ordinary and the exalted alike. And she did it all remarkably, in the middle of a fierce summer heatwave with London temperatures climbing toward 90 degrees, which makes her cheerful stamina in that queue all the more impressive. Let me share a little something here because it is the detail I keep coming back to. There is a particular kind of magic in an unexpected kindness from someone you would never dream of meeting. Those fans in the queue did not wake up that morning expecting anything more than a long wait and, if they were lucky, some good tennis. What they got instead was a memory they will tell for the rest of their lives, the day the future queen handed them their ticket and wished them well. That is not the sort of thing you can buy or plan for. It is a small human gift dropped into an ordinary day. And whatever else we say about the strategy or the symbolism of all this, we should not lose sight of how genuinely lovely that is for the people who were there. Now, to really understand why this raised eyebrows, we need to look at what she was expected to do instead. Let's examine the tradition she gently broke, because to see why this was such a surprise, you have to understand the usual royal choreography at Wimbledon. Catherine's connection to the tournament is official, and it is significant. She is the patron of the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club, the body that runs Wimbledon. And this is a role with real history behind it because she inherited it directly from the late Queen Elizabeth II, taking it on in 2016. So when Catherine attends, she is not just a famous fan. She is the tournament's royal figurehead, following in the footsteps of her grandmother-in-law. And that role comes with a very particular, very grand set of expectations. Normally, as patron, Catherine would arrive at Wimbledon in the way senior royals always have. She would come through a private entrance, one that leads discreetly and directly to centre court, and above all to the royal box. The royal box is the beating heart of Royal Wimbledon, an exclusive, beautifully appointed section of centre court, reserved for the monarchy, visiting dignitaries, and specially invited guests. It is a place of enormous prestige. To be invited, there is a great honour. The royal route is designed essentially to carry the royal from the car to that box with as little contact as possible with the ordinary crowds, grandeur, distance, and a certain untouchable glamour. That is the traditional model. It is worth dwelling on that box for a moment, because it is one of the most exclusive spots in world sport. The royal box holds only around 74 seats, upholstered in a distinctive shade of green, and an invitation to sit in them is one of the most coveted in the British summer. Guests are traditionally invited for their contribution to tennis, to charity, to the armed forces, or to public life, and there is even a long-standing dress code for those lucky enough to be asked. For most of Wimbledon's history, that box, with a senior royal at its centre, was the very picture of the monarchy's relationship with the tournament. Elevated literally and figuratively above the crowd watching the tennis from on high, so the box is not just seating, it is a symbol, a physical expression of the old idea that royalty belongs slightly apart, observed and admired from a respectful distance. And this is exactly why what Catherine did was so striking. She deliberately skipped that whole choreography. Instead of the private entrance and the swift, sealed-off journey to the royal box, she chose the public queue, the ticket desk, and the ordinary fans. She walked, we are told, past the famous grassy slope known to fans as Henman Hill, where those without centre court seats gather to watch the action on a big screen, and she was welcomed inside not by silent deference, but by a warm round of applause. In other words, she swapped the velvet rope for the volunteers' counter. She traded the distance for the crowd. For a royal patron, that is a genuinely unusual choice, and it is the reason this small moment made headlines around the world. Now, to appreciate just how much this fits into a longer story, let's look at the royals and Wimbledon through the years. Let's turn to the history now, because the relationship between the Crown and this tournament is a long and fascinating one, and it helps explain the significance of what just happened. The royal family and Wimbledon go back well over a century, their stories intertwined almost from the beginning. For generations, the presence of a royal in that box was one of the defining images of the championships. And there are traditions here that tell you a great deal about how the relationship between royalty and the public has slowly, quietly changed over time. Take one small but telling example. For many years, there was a strict rule of etiquette at Wimbledon. If a senior member of the royal family was present in the royal box, the players themselves, walking on and off centre court, were expected to stop and perform a bow or a curtsy toward the box, as a mark of respect. Imagine that. Two of the world's greatest athletes pausing mid-stride to bow to the royal seats. And here is the fascinating part. That very tradition was quietly abolished more than 20 years ago. Back in 2003, it was the late Queen herself who decided the players should no longer be required to bow or curtsy, except when she or the reigning monarch was personally present. It was a small modernization, a gentle loosening of the old formality, and it happened decades ago. I point this out because it shows that the softening of royal ceremony at Wimbledon is not new. It has been happening, step by step, for a very long time. Catherine handing out tickets is not a bolt from the blue. It is simply the latest and boldest step along a path the monarchy has been walking for years, away from rigid distance and towards something warmer and more human. There is another lovely royal Wimbledon tradition worth knowing, because Catherine is right at the centre of it. It is the patron, or a senior royal, who traditionally presents the trophies to the champions at the end of the finals. Those iconic images you may have seen of a beaming winner lifting the golden trophy or the famous Venus rosewater dish handed to them by a member of the royal family, that is Catherine's role now. She has performed it in recent years, and it is one of the warmest and most visible duties a royal patron has. So her bond with this tournament is not casual. It is woven into its most treasured ceremonies, which makes her decision to also, this year, go and work the ticket queue all the more remarkable. She holds the grandest ceremonial role at Wimbledon, and she still chose to spend part of her day as a volunteer at the gate. Think about the sheer range of that for a moment, because it is the key to the whole story. On the one hand, at the finals, she stands at the very summit of the occasion, the figure who hands a global champion the trophy they have dreamed of their entire life, a moment beamed to hundreds of millions of people around the world. On the other hand, in the queue, she is passing a card machine to a fan who camped in a tent overnight. Same tournament, same woman, same week. The grandest ceremonial height and the humblest ground-level service, both held together in one royal role. Very few people on earth move between those two worlds as naturally as she seems to. And it is precisely that ability to be both the figure on the podium and the friendly face at the counter that defines the kind of modern royal Catherine is becoming. Let me hit you with a number that puts the queue itself in perspective, because it is part of what makes this so charming. Wimbledon is one of the very few major sporting events left in the world that still releases a significant batch of tickets for sale on the actual day, on a first-come, first-served basis to whoever is willing to line up for them. Thousands of people do exactly that, every single day of the tournament, some of them camping overnight in tents to be near the front. It is gloriously old-fashioned, a deliberate nod to fairness and tradition in an age of instant online sales, and it is into the heart of that very British, very egalitarian ritual that Catherine chose to step. She did not just visit Wimbledon. She joined its most democratic, most down-to-earth tradition and honoured the ordinary fans who keep it alive. The queue, and it is always spoken of with a capital letter by those who love it, is genuinely one of the great rituals of British sport. It has its own written code of conduct, its own etiquette, its own culture. People pitch tents in the park the night before, make friends with the strangers around them, share food and stories through the long hours, and treat the whole endurance test as part of the fun. There is a real, almost sacred sense of fairness to it. It does not matter who you are or how much money you have. If you want a same-day ticket, you queue like everyone else, and you take your chances. In a world where money can usually buy a shortcut to almost anything, the queue stands as a small, stubborn monument to the idea that some things should simply be first come, first served. So when the future queen chose to walk into that of all traditions and serve the people standing in it, there was a lovely symbolism to it. She was honouring not just the tournament, but one of the most democratic customs left in British public life. Now let's think about why she might have done it, and why it matters so much right now. Let's consider the deeper meaning now, because the timing and the context of this appearance make it far more significant than a simple nice gesture. Remember where Catherine has been. This was her first appearance at the opening week of Wimbledon since 2023. For the 2 years in between, as she dealt with her cancer diagnosis and treatment, her attendance was limited. She managed to appear at the finals, memorably greeted with a standing ovation, but the demands of her health meant she could not do more. So her arrival this year, right at the start of the tournament, throwing herself into the full experience, is itself a milestone. It is another clear, joyful signal of her return to public life and of her strength. Seen in that light, the ticket desk moment is not just charming, it is quietly triumphant. This is a woman reclaiming a role and a passion that her illness had forced her to set aside. To feel the full weight of that, it helps to remember the image from 2 years ago. When she appeared at the men's final in the summer of 2024, in the middle of her treatment, she walked out to a spontaneous standing ovation from the entire centre court crowd, a wave of warmth and support for a woman the public knew was going through something frightening. It was a deeply moving moment, but it was also unmistakably the appearance of someone who was unwell and being cheered on. Now compare that to this year. No longer the brave patient making a careful, limited appearance, but a woman striding into the queue in the summer heat, working the counter, laughing with fans, watching tennis courtside, entirely in her element. The contrast between those two Wimbledon images 2 years apart is the whole story of her recovery told in a single tournament, and I think that is partly why this landed so powerfully with the public. People were not just charmed. They were relieved and glad to see her so obviously well, and it fits a very clear pattern in how she and her husband now approach their work. This is the hands-on monarchy. Only recently, Prince William was photographed rolling up his sleeves and physically helping to move furniture at a homelessness charity. And here is Catherine, days after climbing 3 mountains for a cancer charity, working a ticket counter at Wimbledon. There is a deliberate philosophy at play here. The future king and queen are choosing, again and again, to close the distance between themselves and the public, to be seen not as remote figures on a balcony, but as people who will get stuck in, roll up their sleeves, and do the ordinary thing alongside everyone else. As I read it, the Wimbledon moment was a small, perfectly judged expression of that whole approach. Accessibility over grandeur. Warmth over distance. There is one more thread worth pulling because it is very Catherine. While she was there, she also took the time to meet a group of children from a photography project that supports young people from vulnerable communities, encouraging their confidence and creativity. That may sound like a minor detail, but it is entirely in keeping with her long-standing focus on children and young people, a cause that runs through nearly everything she does. So even on a light-hearted day at the tennis, she folded in a moment of genuine purpose, quietly supporting the kind of work she cares about most. It is a reminder that with Catherine the warmth and the duty are rarely separate. They tend to travel together. Now, having admired all of this, let's do the honest thing and look at it from both sides. Let's weigh the 2 ways of seeing this now, because even a moment this charming can be read in more than one way, and a fair look holds both. The first reading is the warm one, and it is by far the most natural. On this view, what Catherine did was simply lovely and quietly brilliant. She used her position not to be grand, but to bring joy to ordinary people who had waited patiently for their moment. She honoured the volunteers and the fans who are the real lifeblood of the tournament. She showed a future queen who is approachable, warm and genuinely connected to the public she will one day serve. In an age when many wonder whether the monarchy is still relevant, moments like this are the answer. They show an institution that can still delight, still surprise, and still make a real human connection. On this reading, it was royal patronage at its very best, tradition honoured and warmth added, and there is very little to argue with. The second reading is gentler, and it is less a criticism than a thoughtful question about what is lost as well as gained. It runs like this. Part of the unique power of royalty has always come from a certain mystique, a sense of ceremony and distance that sets the monarchy apart from ordinary celebrity. The grand entrance, the royal box, the velvet rope, these are not just snobbery. They are part of the theatre that gives the crown its special magic, and so this reading asks, when a princess steps out from behind all that to hand out tickets like a steward, however charming it is, does she spend a tiny bit of that irreplaceable mystique? If royalty becomes just another approachable, hands-on public service, does it slowly stop feeling like royalty at all? There is also a milder version of the question, about spontaneity. A royal appearance like this is, inevitably, planned and managed to some degree. So is it pure, warm-hearted impulse, or is it also a very cleverly staged piece of public relations? Neither of those questions is an attack. They are simply the honest other side of the coin. There is a neat little tension hiding in the very phrase we keep using, the common touch. A royal is praised for having it, for being able to connect with ordinary people. But the whole idea of a common touch quietly depends on the royal being, in some sense, uncommon to begin with. The magic of the moment in the queue came precisely from the gap between what those fans expected, a steward, and what they got, a future queen. If that gap ever closed completely, if royals came to seem entirely ordinary, then the common touch would lose the very thing that makes it special. So the skeptics are pointing at a real paradox. The monarchy's warmth works because its grandeur is still there in the background. Spend too much of the grandeur, and even the warmth might stop landing. It is a subtle point, and a fair one, and it is worth holding even on a day as sunny as this. Here is where I land, and it is a warm judgment. On this occasion, the first reading wins, and comfortably. Whatever small questions we might raise about mystique or stagecraft, the plain fact is that Catherine brought real, spontaneous feeling joy to a crowd of ordinary people, honoured a beloved tradition by joining it rather than bypassing it, and did so with obvious warmth. The gains here far outweigh any misty philosophical cost. That said, the gentle question underneath is a real one, and it is bigger than a single day at the tennis. The monarchy is, slowly and deliberately, trading distance for warmth, mystery for accessibility. This Wimbledon moment was a delightful example of that trade paying off beautifully. Whether over decades the crown can keep giving up its old grandeur without eventually giving up some of its magic is one of the great open questions of the modern royal age. But if every step along that road is as charming as this one, it is hard to complain. And that leaves us with the question I want to hand to you, and it is a lovely one to sit with. When you picture the ideal royal at a great occasion like Wimbledon, what do you want to see? The grand, glamorous figure sweeping into the royal box, a vision of ceremony and distance that reminds you the monarchy is something special and set apart. Or the warm, approachable future queen down in the queue, handing out tickets and wishing you a lovely day, proving the crown can still be human and near. The way I see it, Catherine, on that hot July afternoon, chose the second with her whole heart, and delighted almost everyone in doing so. But which one truly captures the magic of royalty for you is a matter of taste, and I would genuinely love to know where you land. Before we close, a quick word on where this leads. Wimbledon runs on toward its finals, and Catherine, as patron, is expected to be there for the grandest moment of all, presenting the trophies to this year's champions. So we will very likely see her again before the tournament is out, this time in her full ceremonial role. From the ticket desk to the trophy presentation, it is quite a range, and it captures perfectly the two sides of the modern royal patron, the warm and the grand, side by side. I will be watching, and when there is more to share, you will hear it here, and that is where we will leave it today. Thank you for spending this time with me on a story that is, at its heart, simply happy. In a royal world so often full of drama and dispute, it is a genuine pleasure to dwell on a moment that was nothing more or less than kind. The fact that you chose to spend it here, thinking about what that kindness means, is exactly why this channel is such a joy to make. Now I would love to hear from you. Did Catherine's turn at the ticket desk charm you completely, a perfect picture of a warm modern monarchy? Or, alongside the smile it gave you, did a small part of you miss the old grandeur, the sense of a royal as someone a little apart from the rest of us? And more broadly, what do you think the monarchy should be in this century, warm and reachable, or grand and mysterious? There is no wrong answer, only your honest taste. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and on a story as sunny as this, the conversation down there is always a pleasure. And before you go, here is what is coming next. We are leaving the tennis behind and heading north to Scotland, where the King has been carrying out one of the most historic and least understood duties in the royal calendar. Next time we will explore Charles's royal week, the ancient ceremonies, the meaning of the Scottish crown, and why this quiet week in Edinburgh matters more than you might think. So if you have not yet, subscribe and switch on your notifications so it reaches you the moment it lands. Until then, take good care of yourself. I'm Richard, and I will see you again very soon.